Okay, Brown.
Groves.
Hey, okay, welcome to another edition of the Lean Newsroom. And we've been spending the last few minutes playing around with all the fun YouTube Google Hangouts features. So you're going to see some different things on our video this week, and some of it may be a complete bust. So we hope you enjoy that. This week we're going to talk about the new Instagram hyperlapse video, which just came out this week, and we've been playing around with just a little bit. We'll talk about that just a tad, and then we'll talk about the Emmys and new ways to tell stories when it comes to live events, because a lot of news organizations are looking at different ways to tell stories when it comes to live events. And so the days of doing the next day recap have gone by the wayside. So there are innovative ways that we can use technology and other things to tell stories. So we'll start with hyperlapse. And to kick off the discussion, we thought we would show a video. I've been playing around with it a little bit, and this is a video that I shot on our campus. I'll go ahead and play this if this is showing correctly. There we go. One of the things that you notice about that video, it's real short. It probably took me, I think the compression rate on that was 12 times. So it took me a little over 5 minutes, I think, to shoot it, to walk around the building. And then it automatically does the compression. And it's like when Instagram came out, it's one button. There's not a lot of doodads. It's a very simple app to use. It's really hard to make a mistake. It has built-in stabilization. It does take some playing around to figure out the nuances to it and how something is going to reproduce. What's nice is you're not stuck with 12 times. You can make it as slow as, you can make it actual speed if you want, and just use the stabilization. So it's anywhere from 1 time, you can do 2 times, 4 times, 6 times, 8 times, up to 12 times, and see which one looks best. And the other advantage is it's a separate app. So you don't have to upload it to Instagram if you don't want to. You can save it to your camera roll and use it in other contexts. So you'll notice I uploaded my video to YouTube, and I actually pulled it into iMovie to play around with it and see if I could do some editing on it. So, I mean, for a free app, it gives you, it's like having a Steadicam. The only thing that I would caution is that lighting matters. You'll notice there were some real dark spots as I was moving around. I also experimented it with outside today on campus, and what I found was that it's a very sunny day on campus, and it really washed out the picture. So, and even when I tried to fix some of it in a movie editor, it really didn't look very good. So, it's a little limited, but it gives you some really cool things to do. Have you seen? You said you've seen some, Brown?
Yeah, I
Some.
mean, I've just seen a lot of people kind of experimenting and playing around with it. I haven't had a chance to do so myself yet, but you're right. I mean, it's amazing how, technology where you would have had to have had a super fancy camera or something to do. I mean, now it's part of a very simple app like Instagram. I mean, there's just so many game-changing things out there these days. Pretty interesting to look at.
You know, one thing that makes me think about, and I think about it from a music aspect too. That's kind of my comparison, is that the technology is democratizing the the ability to make high quality videos.
Yeah.
And there are pluses and minuses to that, because if everyone has this capability and it's not a special artistic ability, kind of like shooting photographs now, I mean, you can still tell when there's a high quality photographer and someone who really knows what they're doing. But most of us can produce pretty high quality images at our fingertips with our phones, and
Yeah.
so maybe it makes it less about the technology and the process and more about the skill in telling the narrative. Wouldn't you? Is that a fair What do you? I mean, am I just like not making any sense?
No, no. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think there's some real democratizing power here, and that definitely is shifting the landscape in so many different ways. I mean, those. I guess that sort of sounds like a bunch of buzzwords, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, that doesn't mean that everyone has the same amount of skills and judgment that they might put into it, but definitely it opens up a lot more opportunities to more people. So.
Yeah, like you can with the touch of a keystroke, you can be broadcasting live from the mountains. Are those the Rocky Mountains behind you?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Live from the mountainous region, Memphis, Tennessee. So,
Right. I didn't realize they had. Well, I guess they have the Smoky Mountains, but they.
I wish I was really, yeah, I wish that's really where I was. It's pretty sweet.
Um, well, I thought that's so hyperlapse. I would download it from the App Store and play around with it. It's pretty easy. The other nice thing about it, I forgot to mention, you can, if you upload it to Instagram, you can add Instagram filters to your video.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, so I made a video black and white and made it grainy, and it looked like something out of a horror movie. It was pretty cool.
Ooh,
So
nice.
yeah, so there's a lot of different things you can do and lots of things. Just remember that lighting matters. So we'll move into talking about creative storytelling, and I picked out a couple of highlights from the Emmys because I thought the Emmys did some really creative things. So I was going to highlight. And some news organizations did some creative things. So I will show you. Let's go. Oh, I thought I had it up. Oh, I didn't. I was gonna. Oh, yeah, there it is. Let me see. I still haven't mastered the art of this. Okay. Let's go to New York Times, which is always doing great things. Let's see. Grant access. Oh. Okay, there we go. All right. So one of the nice things that they used Google Plus to promote the live blog, which I thought was a smart move. And then when you go to the live blog, and I've noticed they've been doing this for a while. This is not anything new or dramatic, but one of the things that I like about this is it's not just one person, it's two people like having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you're sitting along with them there. It's almost like announcers at a football game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
It's just sort of saying, hey, here's some things. And I really like how they're using the formatting for something to stand out when there's like actual news, right? So when Bryan Cranston wins Best Actor, they actually put that as a headline in the feed. I was wondering how you think about live blogging versus live streaming.
Well, I just saw something a few minutes ago, actually, where the St. Louis Post-Dispatch was talking about how raw video footage in their coverage of Ferguson was their biggest traffic driver. Was just raw video footage. Now, obviously, that's a very different, kind of breaking news event, but I thought that was pretty interesting. I think it just depends. I mean, for the Emmys, the live blogging, I really like what you're saying with kind of a conversation. I think that helps to draw people into it. It makes sense. But depending on the situation, it seems like people, they really like that relatively unfiltered live stream, although I think it's really important to also keep in mind that even a live stream is still, you're still dependent on the perspective of one person, basically, and what kind of they're seeing. You're not necessarily getting a bird's eye view of everything going on.
Right.
But I think both of those are really good tools. Yeah, definitely.
No, that's interesting you bring that up about the live stream, because that's something with the Ferguson stuff that's one of those things where I think as the public, maybe one of the things that we can do as news organizations is educate the public on better ways to consume news. A way to become a more critical news consumer, so that you can say, well, what are the limitations when I'm watching a live feed? I really should think consciously about how the image is framed, and what
Yeah.
is it leaving out, and what is it pointed at, and what is it not pointed at,
Mm-hmm.
and how is that affecting how I'm consuming the news and how I'm interpreting the events that I'm seeing. That's a really good point what you made about that you're on the ground. You don't have that bird's eye view. I remember Andy Carvin talking about that when he was covering the Arab Spring, when he actually went over there and was on the ground and watching it in Tahrir Square. He said it was different. You know, it was really intense, and it was, but he couldn't see everything that was going on. He was limited by where he was. When he used social media tools and used Twitter, he actually felt like he got a better view of what was going on because he had so many pieces of information that were all coming to him at once, instantaneously, to give him that feel for what was happening in real time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there was a New York Times story that quoted Brian Stelter talking about Twitter and Ferguson, and he used, the metaphor that it's kind of like drinking through a straw. You really have to keep in mind that that's kind of the perspective you're getting. Very similar to, when reporters were embedded, with troops in Iraq or something similar, you were getting a very kind of intimate portrait of what was happening, but it was necessarily, also very limited and very much constrained by exactly what those reporters were seeing. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, that journalists could do a much better job, like helping the public understand, how do you interpret this? What does this mean? I think we could get better at that.
And in a breaking news environment, I'm almost wondering if, and you and I have talked about this before, whether that pure, neutral, objective ideal that's out there kind of goes away. Because, especially in an instance where you're embedded, right? I mean, how can you possibly be truly neutral when you are depending on this particular unit to protect you when you're out in the field in Iraq? I was thinking about that. Soraya Sarhadi Nelson did an amazing piece when one of the guys in her unit got killed, and she couldn't talk about it without getting upset about it. And she used to let the soldiers use her satellite phone to call home. And she talked about that, you know what, you don't stop being a human being. And I think that actually is better when you feel that way. And I was just thinking, just today, I saw an item about that guy who worked for the show Cops, who got shot in Omaha. He was with the team, and he had been embedded with those cops since June. And when at the press conference, the police officer even noted, because some people were saying, well, because he was shot by a stray bullet from a police officer. So some people were saying, well, was he being a pain or that kind of thing? And they said, no, we saw him as one of us, which I thought was a really interesting way to describe it, because when you're embedded, I think it's a different animal, and you're immersed in it, and you can't help but bring your own perceptions and I mean, it's almost like qualitative research, right? It's when you go into it, you're looking at it and you're thinking about what are reactions. You are an instrument as well when you're trying to make sense out of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, it's 30 some years after, poll after poll has shown trust in media declining. I mean, it's amazing that journalists sort of think that, I mean, that people are going to, if you say you're being perfectly objective, that your audience is actually going to believe that, because they don't. I mean, and even if you're trying your best and doing all these things, using all these techniques, I mean, to try to distance yourself from your own thoughts about something, I mean, it's not going to, they're not going to do it. So, I mean, I think being transparent and more honest about your perspective or your feelings in the case of something like that, I think that actually leads to greater credibility, and, people feel like they can trust you more. I mean, it's just kind of amazing to me that still is sort of a radical idea to some people, because I don't know, it seems kind of obvious in some ways.
I'm thinking that it's going to change with this generation.
Yeah.
I think that there's an expectation now. I mean, when you look to the popularity of like Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and people who are helping people make sense out of what's going on around them, maybe with an attitude or a perspective or a point of view. I think there is still an expectation of verified information, of not playing fast and loose with the facts. That I think there's still an expectation of fact-based journalism that
Sure.
may have an ounce of opinion in it, that may have. And if you think of the best columnists, they do that kind of thing, right? You can disagree with the way they've interpreted or made sense out of those facts, but as long as the facts that they're using we can agree on those. The danger, I think, is when we get to a point where you just say, not only I not agree with your opinion, I don't believe your facts.
Right.
And I think that's what's starting to happen is we feel like we can, I don't mean we, but I mean just in general as a society, I think people are looking at it and saying, well, we don't have to, I'll just look for facts that support my point of view, and I'll shut out contrary facts. That's the danger. So I think we.
Yeah, no, I mean it definitely is, but I mean I think, I think what you said before about this generation. I mean, I have a friend that's a leading national pollster, and I mean that's one of the main things that they find is just that the younger you are, the more aware you are of just how much you're constantly being manipulated by institutions, by media, and there's like really this kind of hunger for authenticity. I don't know. I mean, I think people are becoming, because they've grown up in an era in which they're literally bombarded from all sides by like a million different sources of information, advertisements, targeted ads. I mean, on a scale that surpasses even what, our generation was. And I think, I really think being able to have some of that authenticity where you say, this is what I observed, this is how I attempted to verify this, here's some other possibility. I mean, I think just sharing that, I think you're right, is going to become even more important, to serving like this next generation of news consumers.
I think that's a good way to put it. And I think that's where these new story forms come into play. So like we were talking about live blogging and live streaming, that way they're consuming it along with you, and they're watching and seeing what happens, and in a way you build that trust, because if you make observations or statements about what's happening and they say, yeah, that's the way that I saw it, yeah, you're calling it correctly, then that's where you build that following and you build that trust.
Yeah, and with the live streaming, you are sipping through the straw, but at the same time, I mean, you're not reading a reporter's, written interpretation. I mean, you really are seeing what they're seeing. So, I mean, you can't say like, oh, well, they just, they purposely constructed a narrative that's different. I mean, there is some value to that, even though it's limited. I think.
Well, and it's like when we read the elements of journalism, and it says, we've moved away from the era of trust me journalism to show me journalism. I mean, that's the era that's what we're in.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like I end up coming back to elements. I mean, with all this stuff, at the end of the day, if you really distill it down, it's still really all about all the things that Elements were saying. It's just taken like a completely new form than even, Kovach and Rosenstiel envisioned when they wrote the first edition. But it's really interesting, like all those things. I mean, we were talking about engagement. I mean, that was actually one of the words that was in that first edition of that book, like long before, we started talking about engagement the way we talk about it now. So, anyway. I digress.
No, I mean, we started off with the Emmys, and now we're like going into.
I know.
What kind of
other types of live coverage?
But that's the way the conversation should be going in newsrooms. The conversation really should be thinking about, okay, how are we going to be authentic, and how are we going to build this trust and credibility with the audience in a way that respects them? And I think there are still some newsrooms that struggle with that still see themselves as, we are the ones that the arbiters of what's news.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is saying, no, you're part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially with the social spaces on Facebook. It's not them coming to your site, it's meeting them on Facebook, and you're one of those versions of the story that they're looking at, which is, and I know it seems kind of non-newsy or goofy to pick on the Emmys, but those live events now are becoming our binding social events that we experience together as a society.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think seeing how we're covering some of those things. Here, I'll go to this. Let me go to the, oops, that's the wrong one. Go to the, oops. Let me highlight, there we go, start screen share. Okay. The thing that, and when we're talking about live streams and we're talking about live blogging and that, one other thing I think that we have to really start thinking about, and we as journalists, if you're looking for a job as a journalist, one of the places you shouldn't rule out are the places where they actually need the content created for themselves. I mean, the buzzword here today is content marketing, but basically what it is we're not going to depend on journalists anymore. We're going to do, and actually one of the things I thought was really compelling was the way the Emmys itself provided information about itself. And what I thought was really cool and really helpful, and this isn't spinning anything, it's this really easy to navigate format of seeing who was nominated for what, and then when they won, they got a little, the nice little statue next to them. So you can look at them, and what's nice about this is this little bio feature.
Yeah.
So you can look at their bio, and then it links to IMDb and Wikipedia.
Cool.
I mean,
yeah, and I mean, I think and I think there's lots of examples of big local events that are things that are more fun, that communities are, I mean, they're already talking about them using Twitter, Facebook, and news organizations still haven't figured out kind of how to tap that in this way. I mean, if there's like a huge festival, or if your basketball team is in like the NBA finals, or there's something going on where Twitter is just blasting with people tweeting from your community, I kind of wonder, like, couldn't news organizations do something a little bit more interactive than sometimes they do, a little bit less traditional than they sometimes do, pulling in some of those tweets and getting people having conversations like in different ways. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess you do see that sometimes, but I don't see, I think there's a lot of potential there that goes kind of untapped for things that bring people together.
The thing I struggle with on that is, how do you do that in a way where it doesn't seem like, like it's, like the brands that get on Twitter and they're always like, what are you eating tonight? That it's that sort of fake social media buddy thing. It's like the annoying person at the bar who comes up to you and says, hey, how's it going? How do you do that in a way that seems authentic and real, and that they are, that's
well, I mean, I think, if it's centered around something that people are genuinely passionate about and are already talking about, I mean, you have your reporters all over the city, they're all tweeting, using the right hashtag, talking about what they're observing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. I mean, it's much more, I think you can be more organic about it as opposed to like a kind of a campaign. I mean, and I think it's still because in a lot of newsrooms there's maybe like 5 people that are really super into social media and they're doing it right. So there's this huge untapped reservoir of people who, like, one tweet,
Right.
every like 6 months. I mean, and if you could marshal like everyone around like some huge festival or event in a more creative way, I mean, I think you could really be a little bit more authentic in terms of capturing the conversation and directing it a little bit. I don't know.
Do you think there are certain events that lend themselves to that kind of interaction than others? I mean, are there if I'm new to this and I'm a news organization and I'm trying to be smarter about these kind of live events, what kinds are good ones to get your feet wet with?
I don't know. I mean, I'd probably say sports, although they're kind of doing it already. I mean, as we've talked about before, sports are usually on the cutting edge. So, and I think the rest of the newsroom can often learn from them. But I mean, I think that, in cities like Memphis, for example, I mean, we have a community that does tend to be very divided by class, by race. There's a lot of, obviously historical issues surrounding those demographic rifts in this community being in the South. But I mean, it's amazing when the Grizzlies or University of Memphis basketball is doing well. I mean, literally, your feed will just be nonstop full of people and not just about like the score or whatever, but about, what they're wearing and what they're thinking. I mean, it's just like this massive, like the whole community just like blah, is like everywhere on using social media, all of its forms. And I just really wonder if like journalists could do a better job of kind of participating in that conversation that's already going on and contributing to it in a more creative way.
I think you just hit on it, Brown. I think you just hit on it when you said if they can participate and contribute to it rather than making it or guiding it. And I think that's the mistake that they make, is what they do is they say, here, use our hashtag. Send us your photos instead of just reaching out. I think ProPublica is always really smart about this, is instead of forcing people to use a hashtag or go a certain way, they go see what's already on Instagram. And they go and already see what people are doing and then sort of wade into that as a co-contributor. A co-participant.
That's exactly, I mean, that's kind of what we're trying to do at CUNY with the social journalism degree. But yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly what it is. Like, if you have 20 reporters in your newsroom and all of a sudden all of them people are already talking, but all of a sudden they're contributing, but not in like a smarmy way, just in like here's my thought and here's my picture. I mean, you just become part of the community and you provide service to it without kind of being this like send us your photos and we're going to tell you what to do and then you do it. It's more like, no, we're getting in there, but we have some skills to offer, like we're good writers, we're kind of funny, we take good photos, like they might actually contribute something to what you're trying to do, I mean, I think that attitude makes a big difference.
Well, and that goes to that thing too. I mean, when we were talking earlier about that pure objective neutral thing, when you are doing that, you're almost sterile. You almost don't have a personality, and you try to avoid letting people like you sometimes. And I think in this case, it might be a little better to say, you know what, here's who I am. And I'm being who I am, and I like these things, and I don't like these things. I think it is a lot easier with sports and entertainment and community events than it is with news. And I think and maybe making that delineation and saying, there are certain times. I was thinking about this when I spent that time looking at what the Lawrence Journal World was doing with its Wellcommon site. That was one of the things that separated. They totally participated in what was going on with the Relay for Life. When they pitched that, they were participants. They actually wanted to see it succeed, and I think it actually helped with how the community viewed the site itself. So,
I definitely. And our good friend Doreen Marchioni, I mean, her research has shown consistently, that if you give audiences reasons to perceive similarity, if you allow them to connect with you on a personal level, I mean, all the research shows the credibility goes up. So, there's actually a real basis to that beyond just speculation.
Right, right. Um, I was trying to find there was something I wanted to note to you. You know, uh, the day after stories that we often would do. So like after an event like the Emmys, we often would do the wrap up, right? And you do your
Yeah.
lead and you do your story. And I was looking at what Yahoo did, and we should think about photo galleries and sliders as almost mini stories. Because
Mm.
the thing I was thinking about, if you think about the Emmys, which was, I don't know, I'm going to inject my opinion to be authentic. Is I didn't think it was one of the most dynamic Emmys out there, but if you kind of looked at, like I had my class talk about it, not everybody, most people didn't watch it, but one of the things that they were talking about is everyone, you would bring up like a couple of things. One was Breaking Bad won everything. That was
Yeah.
the highlight. Some people were talking about Weird Al, the Weird Al performance, and then some people, and then the Robin Williams tribute. So
Mm.
if you look at the Yahoo slider, so you have the best and worst dress, which is kind of a gimme nowadays. Then you have a summary of the highs and lows. Then you have the Robin Williams tribute. You kind of scroll through some of these, and some of them are kind of, but Aaron Paul, True Detective. So you can kind of scroll through these 20 little items, and it's almost like you had skimmed a story in its subheads. And instead, you're getting it in a series of headlines and an easy to consume format. So I think one of the things that I would say not to forget is that that's actually a form of storytelling too. You know, I don't know.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I mean, I think alternative story forms that don't look like a traditional narrative, I mean, that's critically important, especially, on mobile, where,
Hmm.
you know, scrolling through something, a short slideshow may be a lot better than, reading a traditional narrative. So,
Well, and I see more and more places embracing the BuzzFeed model of the lists, the
yeah.
listicles. So I mean, when I popped it up, actually CBS had seized the Google News cluster for a little while with this one when I was looking at it yesterday of the top 5 social moments, and they did their top 5 breakdown with photos. Mashable took a similar approach with photos. That was a photo-driven presentation. I mean, I think we have to think about ways that we are more visual in our storytelling.
Mhm.
And the last one I wanted to highlight was how the 360 vines that they
Mm.
were doing. That I thought that's interesting how some
Mhm.
brands are going to this approach. I think that's kind of an interesting idea. But
Yeah,
they brought this thing out again. This is the Golden Globes, but I think they did it
that's fun.
at Emmys.
That's a good idea.
Oops. I thought the Emmys did that
Pretty
too.
creative.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on innovative storytelling or things that
I
we?
don't think so, but yeah, I mean, I think that piece about kind of joining conversations rather than trying to direct them. I think that was a pretty good
Yeah.
insight. Yeah.
Yeah. That's I think that's one we need to write down. We need to put that in here. But well, that
Yeah.
sounds good. Well, then I think we'll shoot for doing these at 2 o'clock on Thursdays. That seems to be a good time for both of us.
Cool.
So that gets it a little earlier in the afternoon. And good luck with your impending move to New York. That's very
Thank
exciting.
you.
Yeah. So everybody needs to keep an eye out for that, and we'll be back next week. So be sure to tune in and join us. And if you have any things you would like to discuss with us, you can find us on Twitter at GrovesProf is me, and you can find Carrie at BrizzyC. And so message us, let us know if there's something you want to talk about, and we can talk about it. And then we need to figure out how we get people in on this, if we can let them, send us messages and stuff.
Oh
But
yeah. Yeah, I don't know how that works with the live hangouts, but there,
yeah,
there's there's probably a way. I mean, you used to be able to get like 10 people going in these things.
Yeah. I think I have to formally invite them if they're going to participate in the thing.
Oh, I see.
But, all right. Well, we'll see you next week at 2 o'clock on Thursday, and we'll have our topic ready, and we'll talk then. So thanks for joining us. See you later.
Cool.